Hello again, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Silver Bullion Television, SBTV. I'm your host, Patrick Vieira, and today I am joined with Rana Vig from Blue Lagoon Resources, who is in Singapore. Rana, welcome to the studio. Appreciate you being here.
Thanks for having me.
If you don't mind, could we first start off by you giving a little bit about the history of yourself?
Oh, sure. I'm basically an entrepreneur, Patrick. I've been in business, private business, for, I guess, about 45 years or so, 40 plus years. The first 35 or so were private businesses and my family businesses. I'm basically a startup guy. You know, I try to be the dumbest guy in the room. I learned a long time ago I'm not that smart. So whatever industry I pick, I try to surround myself with very, very smart people in that industry. And I try to put something together. So the first part of my career was basically over a span of about 35 years, 5 different startups in my family private businesses. And then after 2008 and 2009, you may recall, the world seemed to be collapsing at the time. So I was looking for a change, and a very successful venture capitalist who was worth probably about 300 million at the time, made most of his money originally in mining, invited me to the capital markets. And I was looking for a change. Our businesses, like everyone else's at that financial crisis, were suffering. So I thought, why not? Let's get it and show me how this works. So I joined him in the capital markets and started in the mining industry, because that's where he was, had made most of his original wealth, put in 7 figures in the market. And you know what? That was 2011. And by 2012, it was like 3 figures. The whole industry collapsed, unfortunately. So, it was a very rude entry into the business. But, I'm a big boy. You deal with it. You deal with it. So I ended up taking a couple of the mining companies that I had invested in, those public companies. I ended up taking them over, and they said, "Hey, go learn the business." And then because they kept saying every year, "Don't worry, it's going to turn. It's going to turn." 2012, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, nothing was much happening. But then by the time 2018 rolled around, I had been in it for quite some time, and I said, "Boy, I've got a young family. I better figure out how to make some money in this business." So I turned and pivoted, being an entrepreneur, always looking for opportunities. I thought, well, what's actually working in the junior venture markets in Canada? And it was cannabis. So I reshifted and focused into the cannabis industry in 2018. And I had the pleasure of taking a company called Curaleaf public, which was the largest Canadian cannabis raise in history. It was a $520 million raise and a $6 billion RTO. And then just to make sure it wasn't a fluke or an accident, I did a second one called Harvest Health and Recreation out of Arizona, which was a $300 million raise. And that one just got sold a couple of years ago for $2.1 billion. So, our investors made a lot of money, I made a lot of money. And then thinking that everybody said that mining is a cycle, it's very cyclical. In 2019, I decided to found this company, this Blue Lagoon Resources, and come back into the mining cycle, into the mining industry. So that kind of, in a nutshell, is kind of my background, my history.
Tell us about this Senate 150th year anniversary medal.
Well, I do a lot of community work. I'm a very, I'm Indian by heritage, by birth. So, how I was brought up was always to be very respectful of people, of your environment, of the area, where you live and work. So one of the things that one of my fundamental beliefs is to make sure that you're always constantly giving back to the community. So I do a lot of charity work. A lot of things I've done over my career with youth. I believe that some of us maybe were too old. They say you can't teach a dog new tricks, an old dog new tricks. So I try to focus on the youth. So I do a lot of work with hospitals, with universities and colleges. So I was very humbled and honored where the Canadian Senate awarded one of the medals at that time to me.
So if you don't mind me asking, what brings you to Singapore? I believe you were stopping by for some type of a metals or mining conference?
Yeah, there was a critical metals conference, and one day was gold focused. So I thought, we're about to put a mine into production, a gold and a silver mine into production here this summer. So I thought, it's time to take our story outside of Canada. And when this opportunity came up, I thought I'd take it and visit this beautiful place.
Any insights you could share that maybe you found out there?
There's a lot of optimism. People are very excited about what's happening, obviously, in the market. It's a crazy time, Patrick, right? On the one side, there's so much turmoil in the world, and yet on the other side, it looks like there's so much opportunity, in the precious metals. So I think there was a lot of optimism, a lot of enthusiasm, and people are just cautiously optimistic about the future.
So I guess we're getting around that area, the tariffs. How do you see that affecting, let's say, the gold and silver industry? I know Trump had said there's some kind of an exemption, but still, a lot of companies are listed on the stock markets. And how do you think they will fare?
I think it depends on what part of the cycle they're at, right? If they're an early stage exploration company, I don't think it's going to affect them too much because they're really focused on drilling and advancing their project. But I think it's someone like us who's in development stage now and who's about to go into production. As we order equipment, as we order various parts as we build our basically our mine, that's definitely being affected. In fact, just as early as last week, as I was signing off on certain purchase orders, immediately our suppliers were telling us, hey, you're gonna have to deal with this 25% tariff, which is pretty significant. So it's throwing off my budgets a little bit. But on the other side, on the flip side, on the revenue side, it's doing great because look at where the price of gold, right now is. So I think there is definitely going to be some impact, but I think it's going to just depend on what stage of the company's at.
Yeah, it's a great point there. The thing with gold, though, we saw it go below $3,000 per ounce, and it showed its resilience. It's back over 3,000 an ounce. What do you think is driving that gold price? Because we're seeing gold having a bit of resiliency, coming down a bit and going up, but yet the market's not quite rebounding any yet.
Yeah. Look, gold. We've talked about this, for I don't know, decades, if not longer, or centuries, really. That people understand, at least in the Eastern world, that gold is really a store of wealth. I'm from India, and the poorest person in India even carries a little bit of gold in grams, right? So even if it's just a gram of gold, because that's the psyche, that's their mentality, that we must have something for a rainy day. So I think what's driving all of this is a number of things. One is all of this uncertainty that has been created. This started before Trump, right? I mean, look what happened, with the wars that were there, COVID. I mean, it's the perfect storm. And now, with Trump coming in, we can see what's happening here. There's just a massive shakeup that's happening. And I'm not saying, good or bad, right? That's, your personal opinion and your personal belief. But the point is, it's causing a lot of uncertainty. And that's the environment that gold generally thrives in. So I think what we're seeing is a combination of people, from the East who already believe that gold is important to have, to the people in the West who are starting to understand that, hey, we should be diversifying and having some of our investments in gold and silver. So that along with the central banks, who are continuing to buy, I think is what we're seeing, where the price is, where it's at, and why it's being so resilient and not dropping.
Yeah, I'll have to ask you about silver if you don't mind. Why, just your opinion here. Why do you think silver is? I mean, it has gone down and bounced back a bit, but it's percentage-wise not keeping up with let's just say the price of gold. What's your opinion?
Well, that's a tricky one. I don't know if anyone really knows the real answer, to be honest with you, because there's so much has changed in the last 10, 15 years in the world. So when you look at it, when we bought this mine that I'm about to put into production, gold was at about $1,350, and people thought I was nuts. People thought you're crazy, and I said, well, eventually all this money printing, all of this uncertainty in the world, it has to catch up at some point. And as we're seeing, it is. And the same thing I think with silver, right? I mean, there's traditionally, there's always been a ratio. So silver should be, way higher, than it is. But then we've seen in the past, all the manipulation that happens, in this market from, some of the big banks. So, the honest answer, I really don't have a great insight that I can share with you, on this, because I don't really think anyone knows what's happening. But I do know one thing, that it's just a matter of time. It's just a matter of time, just like it would happen with gold. It's just a matter of time that silver has to catch up and will explode, just like gold did in recently.
Yeah, I'm thinking the same thing, except I'm not sure if I can go out and get myself a mine, but I'm thinking the same thing.
You can come visit mine.
I just might. Tell me about Blue Lagoon Resources and maybe one or maybe two projects that you have going on.
Well, our main focus is that we do have a couple other projects, but really we're focused on the Dome Mountain Gold Project, which is in northern British Columbia, just outside of town by the name of Smithers, which is a mining town. It's about 5,000 people, but it's the hub of that whole northern British Columbia. It's the busiest office for the Ministry of Mines there. We're 45 minutes drive, so my staff have the luxury of going every day to work and coming back home, which is kind of often quite rare in our industry. We acquired this 5 years ago with my intention of getting it into cash flow as soon as possible. And even though people are congratulating us now that, hey, wow, you guys finally got your permit here just last month, but the reality is, for me, that was even too long. It takes about 15 years on average to get a permit, in British Columbia. So this is a ready to go project. We'll be in production this summer, starting with a modest 15,000 ounces of gold and 4 times the silver. We have a 1-to-4 ratio so far over there currently of gold to silver there. So we're excited about getting that going this summer.
Okay, 15 years to get a permit. And then on top of that, from exploration to production, we're looking at 20 plus years?
Yeah, it's very rare. It's funny, I spoke at an industry event in Toronto recently, and there was an audience of about 200 people there. And I asked them, I said, is there anyone who can put their hand up, who can remember the last time an exploration company went into production? And not one person could put their hand up. It's a very onerous process, right? It takes a long time to get there for numerous reasons. Government regulations, a lot of red tape that you have to go through. Then, of course, the Indigenous people, the First Nations, you have to respect their rights. So there's a lot of maneuvering that's to happen. But you know what? We're persistent, right? So here we are.
But with the permits, I believe Canada is not very open to giving just anyone a permit. I hear getting permits are pretty tight.
Very, very tough. As I mentioned, like the average is 15 years. It's just a tough environment. There's a lot of things to consider. In some ways, I guess rightly so, because I guess capitalism unchecked goes wild. So you have to be careful of the environment. But I think the challenge with governments and bureaucracy, in my opinion, is they kind of go extreme. Right? There's either very little regulation or there's extreme regulation. So this is what's happened here, I think, in Canada, that we've just gone extreme. And now you're going to see with this whole Trumpism, this whole move, now they're talking about fast tracking the very same projects. It's an interesting environment that people are kind of, I think, creatures of habit, right? So it's just they do the same thing over and over again. So perhaps one thing that this whole Trump movement is doing, maybe that's positive, is that it's getting everyone to relook at everything and say, hey, is what we're doing, does it actually make sense? Because look at all the things that we need. When I got in this mining, in this business, there's a saying someone told me. They said, you either grow it or you mine it. I never thought about that before. I said, oh, that's interesting. So we don't realize how many things that we rely on every day that come from mining. And all of this shakeup, I think, is one of the things that's reminding us of that. And governments and bureaucracies now looking at it and saying, hey, why are we so dependent on other countries? Critical metals or and the like. So it's really turning everything upside down, and I think making people look deeper.
Speaking of Looking deeper, I understand the dome mine, correct? It's underground mine?
It's an underground mine, so very little environmental impact. So everything that we extract, other than the gold and silver, of course, we put right back there. So the intention is, after a number of decades, when we're done, it'll be pristine, and no one will even know we're there.
Yeah, because I understand also that's a pretty important thing where, especially for miners that are, let's just say, on the surface where they're clearing out overburden and other things like that, they kind of have to reforest the area and then put things back.
Sure. I mean, big open pit mines, I mean, they're a big eyesore, right? So it's challenging, but thankfully we don't have that challenge. We're completely underground, high grade. This is a 9-10 grams, a ton plus. So it's a very high grade mine, and it's completely underground.
And the infrastructure, I understand that's all set, ready to go?
Well, exactly. So, when I acquired this project, one of the things that attracted me to this was that much of the work had already been done. So being an entrepreneur, my thought process was always, how do we get this cash flowing fast? And so we have spent over the last 5 years and previously the company that I acquired about $40 million. And we are right at the face of the vein. And if you have a chance to come down and visit us, you'll see there's about 900 meters of development, on the side of this mountain. So you can, tunneling. So we're right at the face of the vein. So that in this summer, we will be mining from day one and expect to be in cash flow, within less than 2 months after that.
When you first got involved, I know it's a long process, but how did you particularly choose this area?
Well, they say, the harder the harder you work, the luckier you get, right? And I want to say that this was discovered this almost accidentally, but really the truth is that we looked at many projects, hundreds of projects, as we're trying to figure out, where we want to go, because most projects never get anywhere. As as we discussed, 15 years just to get a mining permit on average. So this one had some permits already in place, and I dismissed it numerous times, to be honest with you, in the beginning. But the folks were very persistent. They had seen what I had done in my other businesses before, because it's very important. The management team is very important, because it's one thing to have a business, but then can you actually execute on the plan? So these people really liked me. They had seen what I had done, so they kind of pursued me a little bit. They were quite aged already. They were at the time when I met them, the main founders were 80 years old, and they really wanted to put this mine into production. So once they really got my attention, we had our legal team, our technical team. We visited the site. We took a look at it. So basically, everything that we needed to advance this project was already in place when we did the deal.
From the bullion side, we often hear, when you buy bullion, you're buying gold. When you buy a miner, you're buying management. How true is that for you, being on that end?
I think it's very true. You can have the best project in the world, but if you don't have the team that can execute, you're dead in the water. So I've taken great care. I'm very, very fortunate, very blessed of the team that we've been able to assemble up there at Dome Mountain, who are well experienced. And part of the reason also is because I've been able to attract very senior people, because they don't want to be in the bush anymore. So the fact that they can go home every night to their families is a huge asset for me to be able to attract these people. So we've have very, very experienced people who've been there and done that. I'm not a geologist. I'm not a mining engineer. So my job is to run the business. My job is to really focus on how can we advance and make sure we're cash flowing. How can we advance to make sure the company is growing? How do I build shareholder value? Right? Is that organically to continue to drill? Because our property is massive. We're 22,000 hectares, and the area where we're actually going to be mining is not even 10% of that entire property. So do we grow organically, take the free cash flow that we're about to generate and go back and drill, and to show that we have multi-million ounces there? Or do we look at a merger, an M&A opportunity? Do I acquire something? Do we get acquired? So these are all things that are going to be in front of management, in front of our and directors here, in the coming months and in coming years to build a company.
Yeah, that's another good point. I was just going to ask you about the business environment there. If we're seeing a bit more M&A happening there, or not so much yet.
No, lots of M&A activity happening for sure. Because despite the fact that the gold prices are strong, there is still it is still very difficult to raise money in the junior markets. Currently, because capital doesn't like uncertainty. Right, there's so much uncertainty right now, so people are kind of hanging on to their money and waiting to see how all the dust settles. But with that, there's always opportunities. That's the thing. So the M&A activity is strong. In fact, even for ourselves, I've already had a couple of calls to say, hey, are you interested? Now, as an entrepreneur, my job is to listen, but I think we're too cheap right now. So I think we'll wait.
So I want to back up a bit, make sure I heard you right. You said a 1-to-4 ratio it was coming up. I mean, for every ounce of gold, 4 ounces of silver.
Yeah, that's currently now that's how Mother Nature put it there. So currently on this particular vein, that's what we have. We have for every 1 ounce of gold that we're extracting, we're finding that it's about 4 ounces of silver. So I'm very excited for the silver price to go up.
Yeah. I mean, I know all the silver guys out there. They're thinking, okay, what's the gold price divided by 4? That's where silver should be at. But there's more to it. There's also the demand and things like that for silver.
Demand and all the things that we read about, the manipulation of the market. It's real. Big firms have been fined hundreds of millions of dollars. For when they've been caught. With this manipulation, right? So. But I think we're okay. I think at some point this has all got to catch up.
Yeah, I mean, it's true. I mean, there's a history of spoofing the markets and things like that. When you hear these types of incidents, how does it affect you being the miner who's giving the products that are being influenced?
Well, it's frustrating, right? It's frustrating because part of my job as being the CEO of the company is constantly communicating with shareholders. And I'm very responsive. Whether it's a small shareholder or a large shareholder, I treat them equally. So emails and phone calls, I always like to be respectful and engage with my shareholders. And it's frustrating because these conversations that happen again and again, and people always say, well, how can that be? Why isn't that legal? And how do you explain that to people? So it's just a very frustrating environment, but it's you just have to deal with it.
Rana, we've been speaking about your mine, and I guess in summary, I just want to ask you what would be the value proposition?
If you are interested in gold and silver, and you're interested in investing in a company that has the potential to grow exponentially, then you should be looking at a company like ours, because there's very few companies, as I mentioned earlier, that ever get to the production stage. So we are now at that point where we are this summer about to go into production. And what that means is that we will be able to self-fund further exploration and grow the company. That's pretty rare in our industry. So that means no more dilution. So that's very, 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 very unique and separates us. If I'm not really allowed to talk about too much of economics because of rules, but you can just do simple math, right? You just do simple math, look at the price of gold, look at the price of silver. You can see that we're going to start off with about 15,000 ounces of gold and 4 times the silver. And if you do some quick math there, you can kind of start to understand what the revenue is going to be and where the company potentially can be at. So that's what I would say, that if you're looking for exposure in that environment, then we're definitely, Blue Lagoon Resources, definitely a company to put on your radar.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you giving us the insight with this, because we're talking about the price here, but there's also going to be the increased demand. I mean, whether it's central bank buying gold, whether it's industry or green recyclable energy with silver. So I think both ways. Both metals should do pretty good.
We couldn't have hit it at a perfect better time. In some ways, this delay in permitting really has been a blessing for us, because as I mentioned earlier, when I acquired this project, gold was at $1,350.
I wish I bought gold at $1,350. Rana Vig, I appreciate your time and insights. If you could, how can people follow you on social media, perhaps, if you have any?
Yeah, they can follow us on X, formerly known as Twitter. They can follow us on LinkedIn, and Facebook, and also they can just go to our website, which is www.bluelagoonresources.com. And if they want to speak to me, I'm happy to. There's an email link there. They can email me, and as I mentioned, I love engaging with investors and shareholders.
All right, well, we love engaging with you. It's been a treat, and I appreciate you stopping by Singapore. Wish you all the best and hope we can do it again soon next time you're here.
Thank you. I love Singapore, and thank you for the hospitality and the kindness.
That was Rana Vig sharing his views on the economy and mining. To see more of Rana's views and the projects he's working on, please visit his website, bureaucracy.com. If you like this video, please do subscribe, share, and give it a thumbs up. All are greatly appreciated. Audio-only versions of this interview can be found on iTunes and Spotify.